Hello everyone, Jay Whitner here with Space Headlines. Each week we do a quick recap of what's going on in space, and today we'll be talking about the third week of May 2018. Our first item has to do with the space station. The advisory committee regarding the International Space Station that advises NASA has made a suggestion that NASA train Russians on how to run the U.S. operating segment of the space station. What's brought this on is concerns about potential delays in the Commercial Crew program, that the SpaceX and Boeing capsules may not be ready in time, and this is one approach to addressing that, is to have Russians run the U.S. part of the space station until everything is ready. The crews they're talking about giving this special training would be the ones that are launching in late 2019 and early 2020. Presumably beyond that point, the Commercial Crew would be fully operational and would no longer be necessary. So this will be quite interesting to see how this idea comes about. In the budget talks, the White House submitted a budget that called for cancellation of WFIRST. WFIRST stands for Wide Field Infrared Survey Telescope, but the House budget that they recently advocated has funding for this. Now, the amount of funding is not what had been requested, what's needed. The need was roughly $300 million, and the House has budgeted $150 million. But certainly if you're involved with this program, this is a whole lot better than zero. And what it probably means is the program will continue, at least in the short run. And if the program stretches out, that normally means that the overall cost actually increases. So this may end up costing a bit more, but WFIRST is still kicking. Elon Musk is in the news for the 1000th time this year or something. This particular news bit is he was talking about his tunnel out in Los Angeles. He's working on a 2.7-mile prototype tunnel running underneath Los Angeles. This was his first public meeting where he was presenting the idea and talking about it. The meeting lasted for about an hour. The crowd was very supportive with lots of cheering and lots of interest. And we'll see how this unfolds, this solution to the LA traffic, which I will admit is rather horrific. I haven't been there in years, but every time I've been there, it's been really exciting to try to drive anywhere. We had some interesting news from a study about commercial space stations, private space stations, would they be profitable or not? And the parameter was, do we think that a private space station operating in 2025 would be profitable? And they came up with a variety of scenarios that range from small profit to big losses, depending on what assumptions were made. But it appears that in all the assumptions, it was a purely private situation without any NASA involvement at all. And in my personal opinion, it would seem likely that with the retirement of the International Space Station, NASA would still want some facility in low Earth orbit where they could do experiments and so forth. So to me, the logical outcome is NASA would become a tenant of a commercial space station and be part of making it be profitable, which apparently this study did not reflect that. So they did talk about some of the markets they thought would be very strong. They thought manufacturing of certain optical fibers would be a big business. They thought satellite assembly might be a big business. And having a facility where astronauts from different nations could go learn how to live and work in space would also be a big deal. So we'll see if NASA will continue operations in low Earth orbit beyond the ISS lifespan. The Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite, pretty obvious why they decided to call it TESS, was launched into space. It's been going through all the checkout process before it really goes into science operations. What you're looking at is a test image, the very first picture that TESS took. this is not the quality that will eventually be coming out of the facility. But this first picture shows 200,000 stars. So this is a 2-second test exposure. Better quality images are going to come next month. And all the projections are that just like Kepler found a lot of planets, this is going to find an order or two of magnitude more planets, most likely, than the Kepler spacecraft found. China was in the news a couple times this week. This item here is the first private rocket launch that happened in China versus government launches by the Chinese government. This one here was launched by a company called OneSpace in China. It's what they're calling their OSX rocket. It flew on a suborbital trajectory, reached 25-mile altitude, and by next year they think this rocket is going to be able to launch payloads of up to 220 pounds into orbit, which would be a big step for China's nascent commercial space industry. Speaking of the space station, which we covered an item or two ago, we also had a launch of the Antares rocket. This was a resupply mission carrying various supplies to the space station and experiments. The Antares rocket carried a Cygnus capsule up into orbit, carrying all this stuff. The launch took place from NASA Wallops in Virginia. And the payload was about 7,400 pounds of various items. Perhaps the most interesting one is the Cold Atom Laboratory, which is going to do unique physics experiments about how things react at super, super low temperatures, like 1 degree or something. This is not my expertise, but super cold experimentations up in space. Another item of China news. What you're looking at here is an image rendering of the Long March 8 Chinese rocket. And the way this thing is going to operate has some commonality with the Falcon Heavy. Depending on the configuration, a core rocket with 2 rocket boosters on either side, it's going to be reusable because everyone is following in Elon's footsteps. So this reusable rocket is supposed to launch in 2020. Fully reusable first stage, the core is reusable and the boosters. The core lands under power like a Falcon 9. And like the Falcon Heavy has boosters on the side that land under power. In the Chinese case, the side boosters land using parachutes. So the long-term plan apparently for China is all of the rockets in China are going to be reusable by 2035. Now I know 2035 sounds like it's in the super distant future, but it's under 20 years from now. Everything will be reusable, they're saying. And the capability of this Long March 8 will be to carry roughly 8 tons into low Earth orbit. And another story about what China is doing in space. They launched a satellite that's going to orbit over the moon, and it's going to act as a communications relay because China is going to send a rover to the far side of the moon. And there's problems with doing this because you don't have line of sight to communicate with the rover, hence the need for this relay satellite. So this rover could be launched next year. So we're seeing reusable rockets, we're seeing commercial activity, we're seeing heavy interest from the moon on the part of China. This is probably something we should be paying a little bit of attention to. That's it for Space Headlines, covering the 3rd week of May 2018. Hope you enjoyed our show, and we'll be back in a few days covering the final week of May, and we'll see you then. Take care.